Ya Devi Sarvabhuteshu Matriruparna Sanstita Namastashay 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 Namo Namaha. I bow to Devi, bow to the Divine Mother. I bow to her in all of you. This program is not a general speech. I feel that when I look through the lens of this camera that I'm looking at you. And just as when I write a book, I always feel that there is, I'm talking to somebody. It's neither man nor woman. I just have somebody that I'm conversing with. And my way of keeping my feet on the ground while I'm writing and not to get into abstractions is to feel that I'm actually communicating with a person. If I mentally see that person raising an eyebrow, I say, okay, I better rethink it. It's sort of like a story I told about an American author who would read to his father what he'd written. The father was not a writer, but a man of common sense. And if the father said, well, I don't quite understand that, the son would say, well, it means such and such. The father would say, well, then why didn't you say so? Well, that's what I try to do. That I'm not just talking, I'm talking to you. Okay? I would like to read an interesting saying. Too many men, the Master said, come here impure. Their problem is lack of a proper upbringing. They come after they've had too much experience of the world. Sex washouts, I call them. They come here seeking relief. After some time, however, the memory of their old bad habits reawakens in them, and they grow lonely for that past evil. Then, too, boys are fickle. They change girls, they change wives. They think in the same way they can change gurus anytime they want to. They don't have loyalty. It is the upbringing that is at fault. In India, there are just as men devotees as there are women, because they receive character training. Here in America, they get spoiled. I've often reflected since then that the Master at that time was addressing the men disciples. He also told us in men sex temptation is stronger. Reassuringly, however, he added, well, women have their troubles too. They have greater attachment to Maya. In conclusion, he said, when men do get there, they become very great. Lest any woman think women are more spiritual than men, as a senior nun once told me smugly, she would do well to remember the saying, it takes two hands to clap. Many men disciples, moreover, remained deeply loyal to the Master to the end of their lives. After the above words, the Master spoke of Andy, a middle-aged, kind-hearted man who had come to the ashram for training. Andy was a good man, the Master said after Andy had left. However, he had had too much experience of the world. There was no inner strength left. After the age of 40, a person must be very determined to change. Otherwise, it will be difficult for him to adjust to a new way of life. Once the Master continued, when I introduced Andy to a guest, I said, this is my baby. I glanced at Andy to see how he had taken it, and then added, I call him that because I am babying him. The problem was I hadn't been able to inject any strength into him. I then said to Andy, I hope you don't mind my calling you that. He was so tactful always. Oh, no, sir, he replied with a gentle smile. Don't think you can reach God with only a gentle attitude. As I've told you all, you must be tough. So he was very strong sometimes in his training, and to the monks he was especially strong. But all of it was intended to help uproot delusion. And the marvelous thing about delusion is that once you no longer have it, it just ceases to exist. It's amazing how things that seemed so meaningful to you at one time and so desirable, all of a sudden they just don't mean anything. God takes that away from you. He takes everything away from you. There is no delusion. But when you are in it, it seems impossible. You know, the time comes when you realize, but I'm not this body. I'm not this separate entity, this ego. Ego follows you all the way into the astral world. It is the ego is one of, you might say, the elements of the astral body. In the causal world, there is no ego. How can there be ego? What is ego all about? Well, I've told you this, and I'm going to explain it again because it's very important that you understand. God is the only reality. God couldn't have created this universe of anything except himself because there was nothing else in existence. Only Brahman. All is divine consciousness. He couldn't make you the way a potter makes a piece of clay. He had to, well, obviously he doesn't make the clay, he makes the pot from the clay. Forgive me for my clumsy expression, but the point is that God had to bring you into existence out of his consciousness. Now, when he did it, he didn't do it from outside. He had to become that. He had to do it from inside. God became the whole universe. You see, it's not separate from him. In dreaming the universe, he dreamed each individual. But in dreaming the individual, even in your dreams, there's this analogy begins to break down then, because although this whole universe is a dream of God's, nonetheless, when you dream, you see things, you see people separate from you. And yes, you've created them out of your own mind, but still, they seem to be different. You are there interacting with them. God is not even that. He's from inside every individual. He knows every thought that you think because he is that thought. God has to become you, and in becoming you, the energy has to move outward to form the physical body. And that particular energy, I've given this illustration before that my guru gave, of the gas jets on a stove. If you separate those gas jets even more, they don't even unite. And so, although the gas underneath is all just the same gas, when it comes out and moves up, it looks like it's a separate jet of flame. Now, on a stove, they all look alike. But another illustration, and a good one, is the stained glass window in a church. You don't have many churches in India, but you can imagine through the different stained glass, stained glass panes, you see that same one sunlight becoming red, green, orange, all the different shades. And then if the glass is shaped a different color, it has a different shape. But it's all the one sun. And so God became each one of us in a way that makes us seem separate, and because our energy is going outward, we see this hand, these hands, this body, we think we are separate, and yet we are not. When you very much are attached to your own body and your own physical manifestation, then you cannot see, and many people are so egotistical that they cannot understand that when they hurt someone else, they're hurting themselves. This is why in the law of karma, that it comes back to you. The way you treat others, you're really treating yourself, and that's why it has to come back to you. When you are kind to others, that kindness comes back to you. It's really very amazing. I have noticed that when I greet people in a certain way, they act in that way. I remember one time many years ago, I was touring America. This was in 1955. my parents were living in France. And so they wrote to me and said that as long as you've come this far, why don't you come on to France and visit us? And I took it as an opportunity also to visit our centers in Europe. And I was standing at the Pan American counter there, waiting to check in, and there was one man in front of me, and he had bags, a little excess, and the man at the registration desk said, "I'm sorry, you'll have to pay extra for these." And I thought, uh-oh, I had a lot more than he did. I had a harmonium, I had this thing, I had that thing. I didn't want to carry the harmonium onto the, I didn't want to check it through, it would break. I had to carry it. I didn't know what to do. And I prayed, "Divine Mother, help me out, please." This man was just angry as could be. He said, "I've had trouble Pan American all these years. I've never had this trouble." And the more angry he got, the more the man behind the desk just became adamant. And said, "I want to see the manager." And the manager came out and told, "I'm sorry, this is our policy. We can't change it. I didn't make this policy. It came from on high." And the man swore, paid, and left, swearing he'd never go by Pan Am. So all this time I was praying, "Divine Mother, help me out." I came to the check-in counter there, and he said, "Oh, what do we got here?" All right. That was all there was to it. But I looked at him as Divine Mother. I saw Divine Mother and my Guru in that form. Well, people will, to a large extent, they will act as you treat them. As you see them, they act. Because what you put out to the world is what you get back. If you are unkind, the world will somehow treat you unkindly. But it's amazing, and it doesn't always happen. Certainly, look at the crucified Christ. He loved them, but he was treading on their territory. They thought that they were the priests and they were in charge, and they didn't want to lose. So there were other reasons. If they had had no ulterior motive, they couldn't have resisted that love. This is so always. I used to see that my Guru would go wherever he went. He had friends because he was everybody's friend. It was wonderful to see him interact with complete strangers. And in living with him, I learned that that's the way to live in this world. See God everywhere and see everybody as an expression of God. And you will see that in that, all this emphasis on the ego and wanting this and wanting to be thinking, how are people treating you? All of that vanishes. And you see that it's all really his show. In the end, it's God loving God. This is a beautiful thing that happened with our Guru. One time we were helping him into his car. He had trouble with his knees in the last years of his life. He took his disciples' karma in that way. Many gurus do this toward the end of their lives. And he said, "You are so kind to me, all of you, with your many attentions." We naturally said, "Oh, it's you who are kind to us." And then he smiled sweetly. He said, "God is helping God. That's his drama." Well, we need to develop that attitude that everywhere you look, God isn't somewhere up there on a cloud or a mountain. Shiva doesn't reside just in the Himalayas. He's in your own heart. And it's a very wonderful thing to go through the streets and think that all of these people are manifestations of God. When you do that, you feel a certain freedom in that love. And so to men, my Guru used to say, look on women as mother, and women should see themselves that way in relation to men. Not try to be tempting, because that may please their egos, but it pulls them down too. As I said, it takes two hands to clap. But of course, sex is a universal thing, and you can't say women are more spiritual than men, because you can be born a man one time and a woman in another life, and you're not suddenly more spiritual for being either a man or a woman. It's all the same thing. None is more spiritual than the other. I've seen that what my Guru used to say is true. Women don't so often, although certainly they do, As a man, I can know it, but they fewer of them have a sexual desire, but they do have a lot more maya. This is why most advertising is directed toward women. Ultimately, I think that we have to come to a point in our civilization where men and women are completely equal. This is the beautiful thing about our communities, in our Ananda communities, that men and women are completely equal. There are just about as many women as men, maybe more, I don't even know, I haven't counted. But we don't think of the difference, and so women may be in charge, men may be in charge. It isn't important to us because we see them as souls, we see them as individuals. If a woman has more talent for something, she's in charge. There's no reason not to, if the man does. But it's not because they're a woman or because they're men. It's because they are who they are. In our work, we have to have businesses to keep our work solvent. And many times the manager of a business will earn less than the people working for him, because we don't think of anybody as having more importance because he's in this position or that position. We're all equally souls before God. If somebody needs more, perhaps he has a family to support, then he may receive more income. But money is nothing. Sex is nothing. Wine is nothing. Everything is nothing except God. We love God, and we seek to see him and serve him in all. And so this world, yes, it's possible to sin. Yogananda used to say that the worst sin is to call yourself a sinner. But that doesn't mean that sin doesn't exist. I remember I mentioned this some time back too, that some people say God does not know evil. Master said he must be awfully stupid then. Obviously there is evil. What is evil? Evil is that which separates you from the truth. Evil is that which makes you want to seek the world and not the divine self. Evil is the absence of true joy, because you think you're finding joy in money and things, and you don't find it. The more you think you're going to find happiness in this world outside your own self, the more you discover that in the end it goes stale, it gets sour. There is nothing except God. And the trouble is that it seems fulfilling. And you keep thinking that just around the next corner I'll have it all together and I'll finally find what I've been looking for. And you don't. There are a lot of corners you go around and none of them give it to you. Sooner or later you have to reach that point where you know that only he is real. So remember that no matter how deep you fall into error, which is all that sin is, to sin is to err. That's all. The more deeply you fall into that, the more you think that's the reality. But even though you fall head over heels into it, he can redeem you. Just think of God, live for God, be in his consciousness. You will see that bit by bit your whole consciousness changes and you feel bliss and you find his love. Joy to you.
Though fallen deep in sin,